Have you ever heard the phrase, every man for himself? A better way to use that, I think, is probably everybody for themselves. It's the idea that when there's something that everyone wants or something in high demand, nobody plays nice. You do what you got to do to get what you want, right? Like at the shopping mall at Christmas when there's one spot and five cars, everybody is trying to get that spot and no one is being nice. Maybe you headed to Chick-fil-A one time and because you know there's 5 minutes before they stop serving breakfast and there's only a certain number of chicken minis, right? So you have no problem cutting off grandma as you pull through the drive-through because hey, you know what? Everyone for themselves. We all know what it feels like to be in every person for themselves type of situation, right? In a lot of ways, middle school and high school can also feel like that. For example, maybe you and your friend like the same person. So you both are going to ridiculous lengths to get that crush's attention because, hey, it's every person for themselves, right? Maybe you fight for seats in the cafeteria because you're desperate to sit next to that certain person. Maybe you fight for first chair in band and you create this total dramatic storyline between you and the other people in line for that spot. Maybe you fight for starting spots on the team or starting roles in the play. You fight with your siblings and your step siblings for the TV remote, the car, the last piece of pizza, I don't know. And sometimes it can feel like all you do is fight for yourself. Because if you don't fight for yourself, well, who else will? The past couple of weeks, we've been talking about something we really want, which is freedom. We want to be free from worrying what everyone thinks, free from the consequences of bad decisions, free from worry and stress. And the problem is sometimes it feels like the opposite of that is true. Rules feel like prison, right? We feel like we're all wrapped up in what other people think of us, and sometimes we feel stuck in the consequences of our own choices. Because of that, it can often feel like even though freedom's what we really want, it's not something we can really have. Now, how can we feel free when we're constantly having to watch our backs and look out for ourselves and fight for our place? One more thing, it's easy for us to keep tabs on how we measure up to the people around us and where we fall in the ranks. And that's not freedom, right? It is, if it's freedom that's decided by other people, it usually feels more like a trap or like control. Well, what if there's another way of looking at freedom? So let's talk about that. In this series, we've been exploring a letter in the Bible that's all about freedom. That's the letter to the church in Galatia. It was written by the Apostle Paul. And the important thing to remember here is that behind each letter found in the New Testament is a distinct group of Jesus followers that was being written to. And these were communities all over the known world at the time facing challenges unique to their area and the people who made up individual regions. So when we read these letters, we need to remember we're reading letters written by a real person to a group of other real people. We're just observers, right? So Paul helped a church in Galatia get started, and everything he taught was based on the message that Jesus came to reveal what God was like. The message was that because God was good, loving, forgiving, and desired to be close to us, there was no longer a reason to follow some of the specific, strict Jewish laws to prove anything to God. But there was a problem. There was a group of teachers that showed up in Galatia after Paul left, and their message was different than what Paul said. They believed that there were certain commands from the Jewish law that did need to be obeyed in order for the Galatians to be considered true followers of Jesus. Now, Paul was not happy about that. For one thing, his authority was being challenged. But that wasn't all. Paul was passionate about the message of Jesus. And a big part of what Paul was passionate about was the freedom that Jesus offered. But these teachers were not preaching a message of freedom. They were preaching a message focusing on following certain rules. So Paul writes this letter to the Galatians with this whole controversy in mind. This tension is the backdrop to everything that Paul says because he knew how much was riding on getting this right. Paul knew that if you let yourself begin to think that you need to work for God's love and acceptance and grace, you're missing the whole point of why Jesus came, which was to tell us we didn't need to earn Jesus' love and acceptance. They're ours because of Jesus. Not only that, Paul knew that if we believed that to be true about God, it would affect the way that we saw other people as well. Because when you start to see yourself as needing to earn love and grace, you start to see other people as needing to do the same thing. And then you start competing with the people around you, and before long, you're living like it's everyone for themselves. Listen to what Paul says about this. He says, "For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters, but don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. That's Galatians 5:13. In other words, your freedom isn't about you. How you use your freedom affects other people as well. And Paul pushes that message of freedom over and over again. He's determined to make sure that the Galatians don't forget it. But he also knows that the temptation that we face to take our freedom and abuse it and use it to benefit ourselves and improve our standing and make ourselves look the best and operate like it's every person for themselves. So, what's the alternative? Well, Paul would say this: use your freedom to serve each other in love. In fact, he went on to say this exactly. For the whole of the law can be summed up in one command: love your neighbor as yourself. Galatians 5, verse 14. Remember, Paul is writing to a group of people who were told that the law was for them to obey, to actually be followers of Jesus. And so Paul puts it all on the table and he says, you say there's more laws they need to obey? I say the whole law is summed up in loving each other. And Paul was doing more than creating this mic drop type of moment, right? He was really and truly believed that the whole law was summed up in that one command. That the reason he believed this is clear. He took his cue direct from Jesus, who said, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you, John 15:12. So Paul wasn't just trying to help the Galatians embrace an idea that he thought was best. He was reinforcing one of the most important teachings of Jesus. But Paul had even more guidance for them, and he goes on to say this: but if you're always biting and devouring each other, watch out, man. Beware of destroying one another. Galatians 5, verse 15. It's like Paul is telling them that there's more on the line than just their freedom. The well-being of other people is on the line when we don't use our freedom for good. When we use our freedom to be selfish, other people don't get what they need. When we use our freedom to say whatever we want, we hurt people. When we live in a way where every person is just on their own, it's everyone for themselves, that's dangerous. See, the thing about freedom is that you can use it for anything, and the choice is yours, literally. You can use your freedom to love people or to hurt them. And Paul is telling us that standing before God, the way God sees us and feels about us, is not at risk because of our behavior. But that doesn't mean that the way we use freedom doesn't have consequences. Sure, you might be free to talk about others and the things that bother you and annoy you and make you so angry. You might be free to judge good, bad behavior, whatever. You might be free to tear other people down or bring attention to the way they're doing things wrong. You might be free to make fun of each other or to laugh at each other. But there will be consequences. It will cost you, and it will cost other people. And eventually it will do what Paul says. It will destroy you, and it will destroy other people. Because this every person for themselves way of living causes you to tear others down, to make yourself look better, ultimately you hurt others and you hurt your ability to love others. Your freedom is connected to their freedom, and real freedom is found in loving others. Believe me when I tell you, you don't want to live in a world where no one is looking out for others. You can use your freedom for something better. So think of it this way: you're not just free from, you're free for. You're free for others and their good. You can live in the freedom Jesus gave you, and you can use that freedom to love others and put an end to the everyone for themselves way of life. Now, because of that, we need to spend some time asking ourselves this question: am I using my freedom to put others first? Instead of fending for myself, how can I fend for others? Now that goes against our natural instinct, and that's why Paul says living that kind of freedom comes from God. Putting others first is not easy because it feels backwards, but that's what God wants for us, and that's where we find real freedom. Freedom from the drive to be perfect, freedom from trying to win the approval of others, freedom from fighting to put ourselves first. Instead, we can use our freedom for others. So let's try it. Try putting the needs of someone else above your own. We have nothing to prove. You don't have to look out for yourself. You can look out for others. That is freedom. Let them get in front of you on the lunch line and get the last serving of nachos. Let them get the praise for the school project. Let them have the role in the play. Let them have what they need because we already have what we need. You were given freedom not to be free to get something from others, but to do something for them. That's how we should live. That's how we should love. That's how we practice freedom. So what do you think would happen in your school or your family or your friend group if you decided to use your freedom to lift them up, to be for each other and not look for ways to take from each other? When you put other people first, it will change their world, but also it'll change your world. And who knows, it might change the world. I think that's exactly what Jesus had in mind for us. And so today, choose to make it your mission to use your freedom to live differently and treat others differently. You're not free from, you're free for. So try it. You might just be surprised how it all works out.